For Sunday, April 8th, you found the Georgia gang. Topping our agenda today, a major indictment at Atlanta City Hall. And the U.S. Attorney says there's more to come. And a dispute between Blue Cross Blue Shield and the Piedmont healthcare system. Some of the stories up for grabs on the Georgia gang.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia gang starts now.
And we're glad you could be with us on this Sunday. Carrie Ichter is with us, sitting in for Theron Johnson. Carrie, you're going to be with us several times this month. Glad to have you.
Delighted to be here.
All right. So the top story, I think, of this week is one that continues to bubble along at Atlanta City Hall. The U.S. Attorney has indicted a City Hall figure, Mitzi Bickers, on 11 counts. And Phil, I'm going to let you set it up and put it in perspective. This one had long been expected.
Well, that's right. We're talking about a pay-to-play bribery contracting scandal that's been plaguing City Hall for over a year now. The feds are investigating, as we know. U.S. Attorney B.J. Pack has been very aggressive, and the latest person to be snared in the scandal is Mitzi Bickers. And she was an employee under the reign of Mayor Kasim Reed, making only $70,000 a year, but obviously was flush with money. And it's an 11-count indictment against her in federal court, ranging from conspiracy to bribe, money laundering, wire fraud, tampering with a witness and an informant, and of course filing false tax returns. So there's a whole lot here, and the big question is she now assisting U.S. Attorney Pack to try to get others? Well, Alexis, who is Mitzi Bickers? You know, she was a political player.
Yes.
She was elected to the Atlanta School Board.
She ran for city council, as I recall.
And was active in the election campaign for Mayor Kasim Reed, and then hired for him in City Hall shortly thereafter.
And then most recently being the chaplain of the Clayton County Sheriff's Department.
That's right.
Wearing her collar.
That's right.
And she managed to buy an $800,000, at least she paid $800,000 in cash for a house on Lake Spivey in Jonesboro. And the feds seized several wave runners.
Yes.
And a vintage restored car. Looks like she made that original $70,000 go pretty far.
She certainly did. But as the indictment says, that she was able to secure money from a couple of contractors that we know of who have since pled guilty to trying to, for conspiracy to bribe to retain contracts from the city. So I think that apparently she was able to parlay that $70,000 a year job into something a little bit more. But that still remains to be, I guess, proven in court, or she has not pled guilty. She's not been arraigned or anything of that nature. So we'll see what happens, but it doesn't look good.
No. Carrie, on the legal side, she was supposed to make bail Friday afternoon, $50,000 cash bond. Looks to me, from a cursory look at her finances, that shouldn't be a problem.
I don't think so. It sounds as though she has.
Couldn't you trigger a home equity line real quickly?
It's exactly what I was going to say. She ought to be able to get a home equity line like that. She's got a lot of equity in that house.
Well, also she has a church that she took over from her father some years ago, so she has a community of faith behind her, which hopefully
with the weekly love offerings?
Well, that, and also to support her and help pray for her to get through this.
She apparently forgot the Bible verse that the love of money is the root of all evil.
Well, one of the things that the U.S. Attorney said that caught my ear was that he was very clear to point out that a culture of corruption starts at the top. And I wonder if that made Kasim Reed's knees wobble a little bit, because he seemed to be referring to the mayor. I didn't see any other way around that, right?
Well, a reference to top officials. I think we don't know where the bribe money went to people in city government to grease the contracts.
And we don't know.
And B.J. Pack, the U.S. Attorney, alluded to that.
And if you look at the theme of the week, it seems to be the lavish lifestyles of public officials who are using taxpayer funds to fund those lifestyles.
And thank you for that transition.
And that top could mean the national level as well. Is that what you mean?
Well, there's some of that too.
All over.
President Trump's trying to drain that particular kind of swamp as well.
But he's not
in this case,
being successful.
In this case, the timing isn't good for Kasim Reed, because the U.S. Attorney makes the comments he made. And then we learn that Kasim Reed, the former mayor, used unorthodox methods to pay off what he considered to be improper use of his city credit card. Now remember, we told you last week that Kasim Reed spent more on his city credit card than he did than he received in salary. Put $151,000 on that credit card, Phil, and then he paid it back. And can you explain that?
Well, he found out the Atlanta Journal-Constitution was going through his records, so he was hustling and figured he'd try to get out in front of that news by so-called reimbursing some of that money. Part of the controversy that, to its credit, the paper has been investigating was that very controversial trip to South Africa last year with Reed and 7 other members of the entourage that racked up incredibly expensive bills with airfare and with pricey hotels and food and all that kind of thing. To pay some of that back, he dipped into another taxpayer pocket, some sort of organization, to pay back what he took for that trip.
Actually, Alexis, what he did was he got a raise midway through his 8 years.
Right. And
he deferred it. He said, I won't take it.
He was going to.
He let it accrue.
Well, he let it accrue, but he also said he was going to give it to charity, and that's what he did before he left as mayor. And
but
then,
taxpayer money is not supposed to go to charity.
Well, he said it.
Government is charity.
Well, that was what he wanted to have happen to the money that was his. Technically, it was his money, and so he donated it to charity.
Part of it was.
And
Let's
City
be careful
Council
of that.
mindlessly rubber stamped it.
Carrie, there was $77,000 that the council voted on. They voted to give money to Howard University scholarships, to something for underprivileged kids, and then something to a shell group. It was a shell only, no money, that was for economic development. That group turned around and wrote a check to cover the airfare on the Cape Town trip. It's
Correct.
all taxpayer money.
The dormant charity, in other words, it was engaged in no activity except for holding money, was doing nothing except holding that money. Meanwhile, we got the city council voting to spend $77,000 of taxpayer money, which in and of itself is an unvarnished violation of the law. The Georgia Constitution prohibits gratuities through taxpayer money, and this is nothing but a gratuity. It was a gift. You're not. I understand why the city council may not understand the difference between taxpayer money and money they can use for any purpose, because they seem willing to take it anytime they want.
Well,
but they're not allowed to make contributions of taxpayer monies to charities of their choice.
But I think the technicality there is the fact that it was the mayor's money, it was his pay raise.
Some of it.
Well, the money that he used to repay the city with was the money that he had received
Well, you know,
as a pay
Kathy
raise.
Woolard, who ran for mayor, she was very blunt about this. She said, this was taxpayer money. It was taxpayer money. There's no way around it.
Well,
you can call it charity.
Well, Carrie makes a very good point here.
It's almost like a laundering thing. Save the pay raise, right, defer it, let it accrue, and then as you're leaving office, say, oh, remember all that money that I didn't take? We'll give it to the expenses I shouldn't have paid. That's kind of the way it is, right?
Well, that's the way it may appear to be, but he also gave it to these other organizations, these scholarship funds and other stuff.
Which is emblematic of laundering. You filter it through somebody else first.
There you go.
Right.
And there was no Downy fabric softener in this one,
No.
folks. And I think the U.S. Attorney is going to look at that. One little note, Bill Torpy at the AJC came up with a good nugget. The mayor, Kasim Reed, increased his office budget during his tenure by 88%. That will get you a lot of chauffeur-driven limousines in cities all over the world.
And you wonder if new Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms will continue to bloat the office.
Well,
Or will she cut it back?
Well, that remains to be seen, but at the same time, the city was coming out of a great recession where it had cut tremendously, and it was beginning to grow, and Atlanta really is an international city. And, you know, somebody maybe want to look at Governor Deal's office travel. I mean, he's been all over the world many times. So, I mean, Atlanta and Georgia are looking at international trade and economic development.
I don't think Governor Deal does it the same way, and I think he does it with a set budget for economic development.
Well, and Alexis, surely you don't defend that South Africa trip, that with the bloated expenses and the giant entourage.
Well, he did pay back the travel expenses, but the trip was a worthwhile trip because they exchange information. They looked at how they do the greenhouse jobs and stuff like that. And as a result, Atlanta now has a program with urban gardens.
Urban gardens. Okay, when I guess we need urban gardens. Enough on that. When we return, Carrie's going to help us explain a big dispute between Blue Cross and Blue Shield, Piedmont Healthcare, and what Governor Deal is doing about it. Stay with us.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
Some 600,000 Georgia employees, particularly in the university system, and their families are covered under a contract for health insurance with Blue Cross Blue Shield. And for more than a week now, Blue Cross Blue Shield and the Piedmont healthcare system have been at an impasse over a contract. This has happened in the past. I thought it was bargaining. I thought it was business. It's dragged on now, and Governor Deal stepped right in, didn't he, Phil?
Well, he did, and rightly so. I mean, this is a serious problem. What was upsetting is that Piedmont was alerted late Friday, a week ago, that this was going to happen. And then, of course, spring break occurred, and it was very difficult to begin negotiations. And Carrie and I were just talking during the break on how difficult all of this has been.
Yeah, well, there's apparently a lot of bad blood between Piedmont and Blue Cross Blue Shield. For one thing, Piedmont sued Blue Cross Blue Shield about 2 years ago in connection with refusing to cover certain treatments and diagnostic practices that were being used by the hospital. Now they get up and they walk out at the last minute on a negotiation over whether or not Piedmont's going to be continued to be an in-network provider. Well, now that the contract has lapsed, all of the folks who are covered by Blue Cross Blue Shield no longer have Piedmont and its 11 hospital system as an in-network provider. So anytime that they go and seek care from Piedmont or any of its affiliates, it's not in-network and the costs will be substantially higher. Now, why does poor Blue Cross Blue Shield do this? Why? The poor nonprofit? Well, because they only made $9.9 billion in 2016. Poor folks. How'd they pull that off? What they do is they segment up the country. There are 39 of them. They have all assigned their trademark rights to an association. The association forbids them from competing against each other across state lines, and if they do, they take away their rights to use their own trademarks. They punish them. So they tamp down competition, and that is the way that they get away with this kind of stuff.
So now Governor Deal is saying that the state will make up. I guess I'm right on this. I don't fully understand it. The state, while they're negotiating, the state will make up the extra cost incurred by Georgia retirees and their family members.
At least for 30 days, from what I understand.
Yeah.
It's quite a mess, and I have one question, Carrie. I don't know the answer to this. It's a silly question. What is Anthem? I thought Blue Cross had been renamed Anthem.
Anthem is the largest of the blues. It is
because it's here in Georgia, big, right? Or did they just pull out?
Well,
I forget.
I think that they just pulled out. But Anthem is one of the biggest blues. Like I said, there are 39 across the country, and it's the way to stop this from happening is getting all of the blues to be able to compete against each other across state lines. If Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee could come into Atlanta and say, "Oh, they won't do that for you, Piedmont. We'll do that for you." You know what would happen? You would have Blue Cross Blue Shield of Georgia back at the table.
It's good old competition rather than socialism.
Absolutely.
Well, and I was going to say, and if it were a single payer system, then all that money for salaries and
that really is socialism.
Well,
yes, absolutely.
We wouldn't have any health care.
We wouldn't need insurance because we have no treatment.
Well, sure we would. Sure we would.
All right, some other interesting economic news.
We have it now.
This week with another further effect of President Trump's tax cuts. Georgia Power announced that its analysis shows that it can rebate its customers. And they also announced that because of the, Phil, help me here, the lowered costs of the Plant Vogtle operation.
That's right.
They're going to give all of us customers, a $25 rebate in the coming months.
Woohoo!
Well,
that's a lot. You poo-poo that, but that's good. And that's
we got the $25 rebate plus rate cuts.
That's exactly right.
And frankly, I think if you can stop your power bill from going up, you've done a good thing.
Absolutely, and I think the Public Service Commission was pleased with that. I think this is also part and parcel with the economic growth that we're seeing under the Trump administration.
Okay.
Well, we'll see.
And at the state capitol, continued fallout from the session. It is amazing that with the whole squadron of reporters at the state capitol, and I'm not knocking them because I've been there. You really don't know what passed and what didn't pass. You know, well, in other words, it takes several weeks
To sort it out.
to sort it out.
I think we're
One
finding
little
out.
quick fallout on that interested me. Lindsey Tippins of Cobb County is the chairman of the Senate Senate Education Committee, one of the most powerful ones, and he resigned his chairmanship in the 11th hour because he didn't like a bill that increased funding for charter schools. He says he's a public school advocate.
Well, I like Lindsey Tippins, but I have to disagree with him on this one. You know, charter schools are public
Thank
schools, and there's over 200 public schools are identified as failing and needing turnaround just over the last couple years. And we need to, frankly, charter schools aren't perfect, but we need to have more. And, you know, there's some great public schools, but we need to have more charter schools.
Yeah, but this was done almost under cover of night. I mean, they had already
Well, at the
fought over
11th hour.
Right,
At the 11th
right,
hour.
they
But
had
we
fought
had
over
been
it.
discussing all for 3 months, though, helping the charter schools.
Can I play Theron for just a moment?
Please.
Lindsey Tippin pointed out when he did this that the difference between funding for the charter schools and the public schools was about, on average, $7,000 per student in the public schools and about $8,500 per student for the charter students. I'm a fan of charter schools too, but there ought to be some equalization of that investment.
I got you. All right.
Good.
Well, it's an interesting footnote, and it'll continue to play out. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about the week that was for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Stay with us.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
Hard to believe, but the primary elections in Georgia are only 7 weeks away. These things come right up on you. But before we turn to sort of establishing the terms of the political races, let's look back at the week that was the 50th anniversary of the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I guess the official stuff ends tomorrow with another march down near the state capitol.
Right.
State government will be closed for that. I don't know, is that because it's a holiday or because there'll just be too many people? I'm not sure which.
Well, there'll be a big event
big
at
rally.
Liberty Plaza right there by the Capitol.
Okay.
And the governor's supposed to attend the rally.
Right, and so it's a quasi-state holiday, let's call it that, I guess. It was an impressive display all around the country, from Memphis to the statue in Washington to the King Center itself, and it seemed almost prayerful, respectful, interesting sort of a thing. How did you react to it?
Well, I think I agree with your assessment there. I think it was reflective, looking at how far we've come and then looking at what's happening now and how far we still have to go in terms of race relations, in terms of poverty, in terms of war, guns, violence. So,
Well, that's where I always split with Dr. King. I was with him all the way on civil rights, and the minute he went to war and poverty, he lost me. Poor People's March, all that stuff.
you're in favor of poverty and war?
No, I'm for. He was for
clarify this.
socialist solutions. I wasn't. No, I was with him 110% on civil rights, but the other stuff lost me.
And one thing I like to emphasize to the political left these days is we're far different from when Dr. King was doing the civil rights crusades, because it was a faith-based effort that Dr. King had out of the African-American churches. And the left seems to be attacking religion now more and more, faith-based. So I would remind them that there was a moral and faith-based imperative behind that civil rights movement.
Absolutely, I agree with that, and they were also socialists as well, right?
Well, you know what? There was an interesting
It was the
split.
Southern Christian Leadership
I'm
Conference.
talking about,
right.
I'm
There was
going
an
back to Jesus is where I'm going.
Well, Jesus was no socialist.
You don't think so?
He believed in the profit motive, and everyone had talents.
Well,
yeah,
you
we
can
could have a
read that
great
a couple
theological
ways.
Actually, I
discussion
think
here.
Jesus was a member of the Federalist Society, if I'm not mistaken. But
We'll have to look that one up.
we'll look that one
Yeah,
up.
that's
We've been
another
early in the history.
Well, one issue that hangs there is further memorials to Dr. Martin Luther King. They're everywhere. And I noticed a little movement, Phil, you disagree with me, but I see a little movement toward a monument to Dr. King atop Stone Mountain. Michael Thurman seems to favor something there. State Senator Emanuel Jones is a very reasonable guy, wants some sort of a bell up there to commemorate Dr. King, and yet as you're well aware, the law says it's a Confederate memorial.
Well, it is, and Alexis and I have agreed on one thing, and that is if you want to change the state law, fine.
Yes.
But as long as the state law stands, you can't have anything else. You can't have a memorial to Carrie Ichter or Alexis Scott up there either. It's a Confederate memorial.
But I think there may be some impetus for changing that law to allow that to happen, which would be a good thing,
I don't think they'd have the votes, though. I really don't.
Yeah, well,
Look, given Dr. King's speech at the Mall in Washington where he mentioned Stone Mountain, I think it's appropriate to say something about that.
I'm in favor of signage. If you want to explain some historical context, hopefully reasonable people could agree on signage and messaging. But that's a Confederate monument with 3 Confederate leaders on there, and so you've already got the King Center here. I just be in favor
that's
of
true
some
too,
messaging.
though. See, that's true.
Yeah.
You've got a national park here, a national monument here to Dr. King.
Which is great, but also taxpayers pay for Stone Mountain, and so it should be representative of all taxpayers. It never has been.
It's a tough one. We'll see. I'm kind of glad that Michael Thurman's in it because he's a reasonable guy.
Yes, absolutely. And can I also congratulate the King Center for awarding a King Peace Prize during the celebration period, and they awarded it to I can't say his name right.
I saw those 2 people.
Benjamin Ferencz.
Whatever.
He was an attorney who argued against the Nazis in the Nuremberg trials.
You know, I'd intended to get into the politics of the matter. Once again, we ran out of time to do that, but I would just say that I think Casey Cagle with $7 million in the bank is well ahead in the Republican primary for governor, and I think Stacey Abrams, because of visibility and a lot of other things, is #1 in the Democratic race.
Well, I would say this Democrat Stacey Evans, who's running against Democrat Stacey Abrams in the Democratic gubernatorial primary, came out with her first ads, very compelling, talking about preserving the Hope Scholarship. And so Evans fired the first shot. But, you know, yes, Casey Cagle has $4.2 million he's going to do a statewide ad buy. He's talking about leadership. But I think the watch when the ad wars start in both primaries.
So far, it's
later this month
Casey
in May.
Cagle.
You'll see polling, especially on Fox 5, you'll see polling in a few weeks.
All right, we've got to get out.
Okay.
Sorry about that. We'll get back to politics next week, I promise you that. And when we come back, we'll have winners and losers.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
And thank you for remembering to join us on Facebook, and remember that we're always on YouTube. The Facebook comments this week were fascinating. One guy got mad at you, Phil, because you plugged the Masters but didn't mention Tiger Woods. We didn't mention anybody.
We did. In fact, Theron and I said Tiger was the man of the hour. He wasn't watching.
Well, I defended
missed
you.
that part.
Maybe I wasn't watching either. I'm sorry. All right, let's begin with you, Phil.
Well, I've got a couple winners, and that is the Masters tournament. As we taste,
Tiger Woods.
And Tiger Woods is doing pretty well, even though he's way back in the pack. We won't know who
He's
the
not
winner
way
is.
back. We don't really know. We don't know. We don't know what happened
Well,
Saturday.
you won't know because we tape before we know who the winner is, but Sunday's always exciting. I've got another winner, too, and that is Kyle Wingfield, the lone local conservative columnist for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. He's leaving those pages, and he's going to become president of that great free enterprise policy center, the Georgia Public Policy Foundation. He's taking over this week, so good luck to Kyle.
All right. How about you, Kerry?
Well, my winner is the memory and legacy of Martin Luther King. And with respect to our last segment, I would say that it is a fitting honor to him, to bestow upon him, to put some memorial on top of Stone Mountain. It may be a Confederate sort of
Apology.
memorial, but putting a civil rights leader on top of a Confederate memorial, I think, is a fitting thing to do. The other winner I have is John Bolton, who will start as National Security Advisor next week. It's a good thing to have people who are advising the president who understand power and its uses.
And he is truly a member of the Federalist
Yes, he
Society.
is.
Bolton's a good one. What do you have, Alexis?
All right, I'm going to add Brian Stevenson, who was also awarded the King Peace Prize. He's a longtime civil rights advocate attorney who argued the case that made unconstitutional life without parole for anyone convicted under 17 years of age. So he's
And the other guy,
criminal justice
we were
reform.
rushed, but we should point out that he was one of the judges at the Nuremberg trials.
Right.
That's a seminal moment in world history.
Absolutely. And one point of personal privilege, can I tell my son happy birthday?
Of course
April
you can.
8th. He's
Of course you can.
happy birthday, son.
You're not telling him how old he.
I won't tell. But
Okay.
It's a milestone. He's 30.
Good. Good for him. All right. I guess it's up to me now, so I will do what I often do, and that's seize on the Atlanta Braves. They've managed to win both of their first 2 series, the majority of the games, 2 out of 3 from in the opener. They have unusually good batting, especially for early, and some promising pitching. Not entirely, but Mike Foltynewicz looked good. So I think the Braves might be a little bit better than we expect. Now they're playing in the cold and gloom of Colorado right now, so that could all be forgotten. And I got a press release from the sheriff of DeKalb County, Jeff Mann, about having to move a bunch of prisoners because of mold and stuff. And I noticed that Jeff Mann has added to his name Jeff Mann Esquire.
Oh my. Oh my.
Really? I don't know how lawyers decide who's an Esquire and who's not. We'll see you next week on the Georgia Gang.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program.